You can't escape an escape room on a stationary bike.
Can I get out?
But this place has its own set of rules.
Welcome to the lab. We are currently in Governor's Island in the year 2053. Currently, this is the only place that is above sea level.
Escape rooms, virtual reality, whatever it takes to get the rest of us to pay attention to climate change. That's the goal of the Overview Collective, inspired by the Overview Effect,
which is a phenomena that astronauts experience when they go to space.
You know all about climate crisis?
This man is all about invading your space.
This is not really about me. It's about all of us here in this climate emergency.
And some people already think the odds are against our species' future.
I have decided not to have children because of the climate crisis.
For folks who aren't quite ready to go on Birthstriker, but who have plenty of eco-anxiety, there are new kinds of therapy.
So eco-psychology is an attempt to take the good healing that a person experiences in therapy and have it be the healing of the earth and the person.
This week, working toward a breakthrough. Before we hear those dreaded words, I'm afraid we're out of time. Barack Obama urged us to be the change that we'd like to see in the world. But when it comes to climate change, it's not that easy. Or is it? How can shifting our attitudes move the needle on saving the planet? When you think about it, awareness really is key. And in this episode, we're going to meet people who are working to change our hearts and minds when it comes to personal choices about the planet. And the conversations are happening everywhere, from innovation to a therapist's office to pillow talk, even underground. So why is New York City's iconic train the perfect stage for you and the message?
Well, you know, if I'd asked any New Yorker before I started doing this whether I should do it or not, they would have said no. Because in a way, it's one of the most transgressive things you can do on the subway is to break into people's personal space. There's 8 million people in this city. A huge proportion of them are traveling in the subway. But I was sitting there one day and I thought, I have an audience. I have to say something. I went home and I wrote a speech. I went back within 24 hours and delivered it. Nobody told me to shut up.
That's success already.
Nobody pushed me out of the subway car. And then I learned it by heart and I developed a flyer. And so when I'm done, I walk down the car and I stop in front of each person and I actually ask them, if they're not holding their hand out already, would you like a flyer? And you know, some people treat me like I'm completely invisible and I sort of push it just a little bit, and sometimes they'll look up and take one, take their earbuds out and say, what? And then they'll take a flyer. Yeah. But it's not uncommon for like 80 to 100% of the population of the subway car to take a flyer.
From a subway platform to the Governor's Island ferry, a new wave of activists are using their unique skills and experiences to meet New Yorkers where they live, to raise awareness about climate change.
So yeah, there's some upstairs, there's a lot of installations up there.
Very cool. Oh, New York Ironweed. This is the whole concept. So why is VR such a potentially game-changing tool to use in getting people aware of what's actually happening on our planet now?
Well, I think what it mainly does is it allows you to step into the scene and to be part of it, and that creates these new visceral connections that are emotionally deeper. And we need at this moment to connect people in ways so that they can feel what their impact is and really understand from an empathetic point of view what it feels like to be in other parts of the world.
As the co-founder and CEO of the Overview Collective, giving people the feels is a full-time job for Kristen Gutekunst.
Overview Collective is really inspired by the overview effect, which is a phenomena that astronauts experience when they go to space. And they look back at this tiny, fragile planet and they think, it's floating in the middle of nothingness, there's no borders, it's beautiful, and that's where Earth is, that's where life is on Earth. And so they feel like they need to protect it, they feel like they need to, that they're part of something bigger.
And this is so much bigger than just the New York protests. Take a look, part of a global call for action.
There's a lot of inequalities in how climate change is affecting different populations around the Earth. And so what we're trying to do is to create many entry points in fun and engaging ways. And so we're experimenting with virtual reality, with immersive escape rooms. So if we can start them down that path with fun and with entertainment, then we can hopefully create this great movement around it.
All right, we are heading into the future. Follow me this way. We're heading to an abandoned laboratory like you do. Follow me, hold your breath as you go through these time travel vines. We're about to time travel.
Welcome to Clue Chase. I'm Smuggles, longest surviving intern.
Good to meet you. Okay.
So welcome to the lab. We are currently in Governor's Island in the year 2053. Currently, this is the only place that is above sea level in New York City. So good thing you ended up here.
This station has time travel capabilities and can possibly reverse the damage to the climate. I just need you to finish my prototypes before the lab runs out of power. And if you can complete them, the lab is programmed to immediately deploy them to 2019, and that will hopefully ensure a better future. Our time is limited, as the battery power from that bike can only power a small charge, so hop on. Good luck and Godspeed.
Can I get off? Okay. Where do I start? It's powered up. Hop off.
In addition to being my partner in turning back the doomsday clock, Tariq Muhammad is the Overview Collective's co-founder and chief creative officer. And when he's not saving the planet in an escape room, he's busy highlighting actual solutions using virtual reality.
Is this your shop? This is our little station over here.
So the Billion Oyster Project is an amazing initiative here in the New York Harbor, and it's a great group that is committed to restoring the harbor with oysters in order to help clean the harbor. So essentially we went on a VR journey with them and try to capture what the volunteers will do. And here, why don't you check it out? I'll just shut up. And no spoilers.
It went away, but I saw it. It's down here somewhere.
Okay, so now use the trigger.
The oyster has always been the keystone species of this harbor. In the 1600s, when the first Dutch explorers came here and had documented the area, they documented 220,000 acres of oyster reef and quite a biodiverse habitat.
One thing about VR is that it's a more intimate experience, so it's just you and the experience. And so I think that really helps to engage people a little bit further on a more emotional level as well.
Guys, so you see the pointer moving?
Okay, where is it?
And that's essentially what we're trying to do at the Overview Collective, is figure out ways to bring these complex issues into more engageable, digestible ways.
Wait, I want to see it. What did it feel like?
What did you think?
It's wonderful.
So are we going to be able to technology our way out of these effects that we're seeing immediately of climate change and into the future?
There has to be a realistic standpoint that we have really crossed many thresholds that we thought we weren't going to cross sooner. And so A lot of it has to be planning about how we live with these new realities in the near future, because we only have 10 years left to act. We've already gone faster than we thought we would. So we have to, in places, urban centers like this, start to really realize how are we going to already plan for it while trying to take drastic measures to have a systemic change.
Okay, so there's a B train pulling into the station here. I want you to tell me just by sight what makes a good mark for when you're about to give the pitch. How's this train looking? Is this like a train?
It looks fine. I mean, you need a car that's more or less full of people, but without people standing up in it, because when I talk, I like to see people's faces because I'm talking to them.
Is this us?
This is a Manhattan-bound Q local train. The next stop is
How do you break through? How do you grab the attention without doing backflips and saying, "Showtime, ladies and gentlemen"?
What I do is I yell as loud as I can.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone.
Yeah.
I don't want your money.
That's a good open.
And the minute I say, I don't want your money, you can feel the atmosphere change. This is not really about me. It's about all of us here in this climate emergency. And then I proceed to say, I'm an elderly man with 5 grandchildren whose lives are going to be much more difficult and painful than mine or many of yours ever were. I notice then people look up, especially older people.
Yeah.
Think, oh, grandchildren. I've got grandchildren. Greenhouse gas levels are now higher than they've been in 3 million years. Last time this happened on Earth, there were mass extinctions. It's about forest fires raging out of control in the Amazon, in the Arctic Circle, and last year in California, where an entire city burned to the ground. The oceans are warming and expanding, and sea levels are rising everywhere. More and bigger storms mean there'll be another Hurricane Sandy in New York City. The polar ice caps are melting. The glaciers are retreating. I know you don't want me standing here shouting at you in a subway car, and I don't particularly want to do it either, but I feel that I have to, because right now we're sleepwalking into a catastrophe. All of us need to wake up and not look away because this is so painful.
Waking up and not looking away is a choice, one of hundreds we make every day. Paper or plastic, taxi or subway, a salad or the fries. The things you can basically decide sleepwalking. But what about a single choice that can reverberate through the generations? Or not?
I've always wanted to have a child. Growing up, I thought about how I would raise them, which extracurricular activities to put them in, what road trips we would go on together, and what life skills I would bestow upon them. But this magnificent, beautiful, and intelligent child may never exist. I have decided not to have children because of the climate crisis. In my research on climate change, I came across a group called Birthstrikers. These men and women have pledged not to have children because of the state of our planet. Even Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez posed the question.
There's scientific consensus that the lives of children are going to be very difficult, and it does lead, I think, young people to have a legitimate question. Is it okay to still have children?
On the other side of the debate, in response to the Green New Deal, Senator Mike Lee thinks
the solution to so many of our problems, at all times and in all places, is to fall in love, get married, and have some kids.
But even if we were to push out a bunch of Greta Thunbergs, we only have until 2030 to fix the planet. And even if my child was the next great leader, I'm afraid the people in power still won't listen. There are different reasons why people decide not to have children because of the climate crisis. Now, this first one is extremely harsh, so get ready. Maybe, as a species, we should go extinct. We have ravaged this planet beyond what it could take. Another factor is that kids take a lot of resources. Personally, I try my best to be an eco-friendly person. I drive and fly less than average, I don't eat much meat, and I'm stingy with the thermostat. But academic philosopher Trevor Hedberg says the emission reductions tied to these behavioral changes pale drastically in comparison to the reductions that could be made by having fewer children. The last factor, and this is the one that brought me to my decision, what kind of life will our children live? Will they be wading through water? Will they be struggling to eat? Will they end up as refugees, constantly moving to avoid hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfires, and tsunamis? I'm not telling you to not have a child. On the contrary, having a child is the biggest show of hope for the future. Maybe one day I'll be able to change my mind. Until then, I'll do everything in my power to create a better world for our children.
So what's the best case scenario that you hope for when you jump onto a train?
One is that people will want the flyers that I give them. People will come up to me afterwards and say thank you and acknowledge that they wanted what I had to offer. And this is not about my ego, it's like a clear acknowledgement that there's a hunger for information out there. And thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for
Thank you very much.
Open everybody's eyes and minds.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Would you like one? Thank you.
So has there, on the flip side, ever been a scenario where you're like, they're just not getting it?
Yes, and I have no way of predicting that. Yeah. You know, sometimes I'll walk into a car and it will be like talking to a stone wall. This is less and less as I become more and more relaxed, but it's true. Sometimes there's just nothing going on and most people shake their heads, don't want a flyer.
So what would it take for you to take the initiative to take a flyer or get involved in something that you think could help reduce the climate mess? Like, where would it impact your life, what do you think? Borrow his flyer. Well, it's about climate change and the crisis that we're in and how we can get involved in something to help stop it. So, together, read it to me then. Why did you take one? That's why I'm asking. So I asked those people why they didn't take the flyer. You gave an impassioned speech that was about something that presumably impacts them, and they were just like, oh, well, I didn't listen.
I mean, it's really good that you did that you went and asked those people, and sometimes I'm quite persistent, you know, and I found that since I started doing this, I don't really have any kind of filters anymore. Yeah. No? You know all about climate crisis? Yeah? Okay. You know,
Is it hard not to take it personally? Because in a lot of ways, it's the most personal issue ever in the world, right. But it's also like, hey, I'm talking to you. I'm trying to get you involved in saving our lives.
Right, exactly. Well, there was a point where I realized quite early on that there's really no Richard here. I mean, nobody knows me, you know. I'm just an elderly white guy in the subway that gets up and starts yelling, you know. Yeah. I'm anonymous. So, and when I take that a step further, it makes it much easier for me to walk up to anybody and say, hey, this is really interesting. I think you should read it, you know.
So nothing personal?
Nothing personal.
This is our train.
Yeah. And it's secure. Even though I've done this dozens and dozens of times now, I still have to push myself. Yeah. I still have to say, Richard, you have to do this. You don't have a choice, you know. If I just relied purely on impulse and personality, I would read my book.
It's not easy to take a stand and challenge others to join you. In fact, it can be downright hard. But when things get too difficult, there is help for the asking.
So this is an offshoot of a Ditmas Park walkabout. Maylin and the boys have already been on this very route, and so it must be pretty good if they're back for a second shot. So, and this one's called Waterfall, which you're not going to stand under because of the blue-green algae, because I don't want you to get hurt. But I wanted you to have that like profoundly refreshing experience of having the water flow over you. So now I jackass this thing around the whole hour and a half of our walk so that at any moment you could, here you go, you could go over here, here you go, yeah, and take a dip. Now it's like a punch bowl, so take a dip and take a sip. It's clean water, I assure you, no blue-green algae. Go get a sip of water.
Oh, good. The first thing on my agenda is a meditation body scan. I need that. So let's start there. Just give us like a minute to just breathe in silence. And as we do that, just take notice of whatever sensations you are experiencing in your body. My name is Jessica Sarante. I am a life and leadership coach and a co-founder of an organization called Radical Support Collective. We support people who are in the movement for ecological justice, and we support them through training and through coaching. So I work with individuals who identify as change makers in the climate space and support them to go past the places where they would normally stop themselves as we do our work. It's so common that we come up against our own internal stopping points. Back off, right? Who am I to do this work? Who am I to have an impact on the climate crisis, to pursue my dream job? And we support people to move past those things so they can make the contribution that they seek to make.
So eco-psychology, as I understand it, is an attempt to take, you know how modern therapy is one patient, one therapist? Well, in the old days, Native American psychology, Aboriginal psychology in Australia, African psychology, they used to think about the earth and the person and healing both in the same process somehow. And so that's what eco-psychology is trying to do. There's a book that was written, and the name is, We've Had 100 Years of Psychotherapy and the World is Getting Worse. So eco-psychology is an attempt to take the good healing that a person experiences in therapy and have it be the healing of the earth and the person.
After college, I worked for a couple different corporate accountability organizations, Greenpeace and Rainforest Action Network. And it was during those years that I started to experience some burnout myself. I was getting exhausted. Like the work of resisting against these epic forces that are destroying the earth burns really hot on us. My clients are folks who identify as change makers in some way. There's a difference between what we call your monkey mind, which is that voice of doubt, worry, and fear that chatters at us, and what we call your voice of wisdom, your internal voice of knowing. And so my clients learn to parse out the difference between those two voices so that the monkey mind, the doubt, worry, and fear, no longer stops them. Okay, last question for now. Some gifts that I'm grateful to contribute to my community in this time are.
Here's the third of the 3 great trees for you to explore today. So I'll put out some mats if you want to sit around and make yourself at home with this tree. See what thinking about the idea that usually we think of our people are separate from nature, but that's like an illusion. And today's walk is to kind of cut against that illusion and to remember that we and nature are the same group. We're the same thing. We are of nature. Yeah, that's how you're going to get hot. We're going to walk straight across. We're going to be like the Bushmen of the Kalahari. We're going to sort of sense each other as we move through the field. With our good intentions, with our heart, kind of focusing love and goodwill toward the baby turtles. And that way, even though we can't single-handedly solve climate change, we can lend our good wishes and love toward the world that we do have and to try to preserve it, you know? So why don't we do that? Why don't we take 3 minutes and we'll focus our energy, our healing energy in this direction, wishing the baby turtles well with their lives, okay? So 3 minutes.
As I face the reality of the ecological crisis, what I'm grateful for is. What I'm grateful for, I was listening to an interview that Joanna did with Extinction Rebellion. Did you listen to that? And she was, I've heard her say this a million times, but it hit me differently this time. I'm saying, like, is there a more exquisite time to be alive as a human being? Like, when in the lineage of human history can your life possibly have more meaning? Like, there is an opportunity in this lifetime to turn the tide, to help bring humanity back into connection with the earth. And that's a gift. All revolutionaries, effective activists have in common is that they all have or had the ability to sustain themselves through their work for the long haul. So really at the end of the day, that's why Radical Support Collective exists. That's why I do the work that I do. Because I want more people in our movement to have the ability and the skill to sustain themselves in their work for the long haul.
We humans, we tend to think of going into the earth, we associate it with death only, but the turtle has a different sense of the uses of going into the earth, right? And maybe we could use, the other animals' sensibilities about the earth, rather than just being afraid or sort of feeling like the earth is alien or where we go only to die. Maybe if we learned from the animals to treat the earth differently. And so that's sort of the political undercurrent to the walkabout. We don't talk much about climate change, but it's in everything that we do. It's even in, our reaching into the watering hole, sensing the heat and sensing our need to come together at the peaceful place of the watering hole.
Thanks for going in with us on how this changing climate is changing people's minds. And we hope it inspired you to think about ways that we can all safeguard this beautiful planet of ours right from our very own city. If you need any further inspiration, check out past episodes of the show at our home on the web at youtube.com/BRICTV. Bye now.